Well, this request ends up being very, very simple, and that is, what is a lost edge? And of course, the person goes ahead to say, truth is, I'm totally confused about edges. Please explain. Well, let's take a twist that's unusual when talking about lost edges. First of all, let's address what is a lost edge. And let's just do that with a little bit of demonstration. So I'm going to make a shape. And just make that shape very simple. There's a shape. Very simple shape. Now let's make another shape beside it. And I'll change the volume a bit of the same color and make another shape beside this shape. Now, let's change it more than that. Let's change the value relatively significantly so that you can see. There we go. Let's get it even lighter. There we go. So I have two shapes there now, and you can see them distinctive. One shape, another shape. Now, you can see those shapes because of the edge. We see all shapes because of edges. Edges are created by differences. Usually differences in values, sometimes differences in colors, but it's usually a difference in value that will show us the edge of a shape. Now, to make that edge lost, we can do something like this. We can simply blend the edges together. I'll just give that a nice little blend. And now the edge is lost. We don't see the edge anymore. So the edge is lost between those two shapes, and it really feels like now one shape. One shape with a dark blending into another value. That's one way to lose an edge. Another way to lose an edge is to change the color. Let's just change the color just a little bit here. Let's change that color to a color similar. So we will similar in value. So let's say if I put a color right here, now you see that color is darker in value against this color, so we can see that as an edge between those two. Now if I lighten that color so that it becomes pretty much the same value right here, if you squint, even though the color itself is different, let's get it more and more in the same value. This is, there we go, like that. And if you squint, you can see those two tending to blend one into the other, and the edge is not exactly lost. But the edge is, we see that as more of a continuation. We can lose that edge by just giving it a slight little blend. So there we go, right there. And now we have another shape blending into one of a different color. The edge gets lost. Sometimes the edges of backgrounds are lost. Now that we have talked about the lost edge, let's look at how Sargent has used the lost edge in this painting called Kashmir. You look at it without looking for what he's done in there, and you might just say, well, he's got all these women. We can see all these women, and there's images to see the background in there. But how does he cause that painting to be more unified so that our eye wants to see this as a complete and a unified painting rather than separate images unrelated to each other. Let's look more closely. If you look right in here, you see, and squint your eyes, you see right in there, you see how this is one, these colors are similar, but they're different in hue. One is more red-violet, one leans more towards the red-orange. But if you squint, you see those are pretty much in the same value range. He has lost that edge. He's lost it. He's blended them more or less into each other, and he's kept them pretty much in the same value range. Then we see it here. We see the robe in shadow of this person, and the robes in shadow here. And if you look at that just as a single area without looking at what it's a part of, you see that as, no, you don't see the edge between those. You see that pretty much as feeling as one shape. But then when you look at the whole thing, you see the two images together. You don't notice that lost edge. It is a lost edge right there. You don't notice the lost edge because of two images here. And you see, Sargent will use that principle, as many master artists will use it, use that principle throughout a piece in order to cause the eye to move from one image to the other. Now, what does your eye do when it sees an image? Your eye will identify the image as what it is. But in order to make that be a unified part of the painting, we as painters will control what we do with the values and the shapes of those images to cause them to be unified together. Now, one example of that, oh, by the way, you can continue to look through Sargent's piece, and as you isolate bits and bits of the painting itself, you can see where he's used that principle of lost edge. He's used it brilliantly throughout. The problem that a lot of people run into when they're painting images is that they are more focused on the image than they are on what it's doing in the painting. So let's do just a little bit of an experiment here, and let me show you what I'm talking about. So I'm just going to let's just do some abstracted shapes here, much like we have done there. I don't have a reference here, just the principle of edges themselves. And so let's say if you were, say we have an abstracted shape here, like this, and you have another abstracted shape here, like that. Well, you see those as two abstracted shapes. If you see them as two abstracted shapes, you don't think too much about it because they're abstracted. But what if they're images? So let's change that, and let's just say we have, we could say we have the image of a tree trunk, for example. And I'll just put that right here. Now let's say we have the image, there's a tree trunk right here. And let's just go ahead and just make that as a gray image with no light on it right there. So that would be the image of a tree trunk right there. And then there's a tree trunk behind it. So we might do something like this, where we put a tree trunk behind it, like that. Let's change that just a bit right there. Now, if we have those edges separated, we have two separate tree trunks. If we have those images more or less the same value, we will see them as two separate tree trunks, but we will see them blended in our vision. Our eye will move from one to the other. And so let's say that we have a little bit of light that's beginning to shine on one side. It's a rainy day, and there's a little light shining on one side of this one. Let's get it a little bit more than that. And there's a little bit of light shining over here on this one, catching it in the same way. If we separate those as tree trunks, then they look like separate images. So if we make, for example, if it's okay, that's a tree trunk, so I need to separate it. All right, now we have two separate images. But if we then look at those as more of a unit and join those edges by creating a lost edge between them, then we've created the eye's ability to flow from one tree trunk into another. And then that can help further to unify a painting. So you see there's a difference between painting individual images that have distinct edges with each other and images that will merge, or images that will belong together when in a painting together. So if you want to show in your paintings, you want to show not just images, not just individual images, but you want to show those images related to each other. You find various ways that within the painting itself, you can lose those edges through either the similar values, such as we've done there, or with similar colors, such as we've done here, blending those edges together. And that's going to give your painting a lot more unity. The opposite of that is to have the individual shapes all individually defined, and then the shapes feel flatter. They don't feel really unified in a painting. So you can use the lost edge principle as you're working on your paintings. You can use that lost edge principle just by looking for places where you can actually lose an edge between two images and create a visual unity. So the eye then will flow through that. It identifies those as the images they are, but the eye will flow through those images and help to create a more unified painting. Be sure to view all of our quick tips. And while you're doing so, subscribe to the channel, click on the bell so you'll always get a notice when we produce a new quick tip, which is every week. And if you have a question, leave it in the comments section and we'll make a quick tip for you. Also, take a trip over to DianeMize.com where I have full-length lessons, downloads, DVDs, lots of other stuff there, some free stuff for you. And while you're there, you can subscribe to the newsletter, and that way you'll always be informed every time we do something new.